everybody. This is Marlene with Eerie News. Today is August 9th, 2022, Tuesday, August 9th, 2022. It's a weird world out there. It gets weirder all the time. So let's find out just exactly how weird is it. The first story it's a follow-up on an existing story. All right. This is something that appeared originally on Eerie News, which had to do with all these bodies that keep popping up out of Lake Mead, which the water levels, apparently there's been droughts out there for years, a long time, so these water levels keep dropping. So now everything is being exposed, including human remains. And I reported like maybe 3 weeks, it was May, I take that back, time flies, where first they came up with a guy stuffed in a barrel in one of these probably industrial type barrels. And they're saying that it's a homicide right off the bat because he was shot and he looks to be wearing clothing from the 70s or 80s. So people, they're thinking, is this something mob related? Remember, this area is very close to Las Vegas, Nevada. Then a second set came up, and you're going to see how interesting that is because there's a tie-in now. Because remember, even though they send out some of these remains for DNA. Contrary to the CSI effect, some of this stuff takes a while to come back. But anyway, since then they've had a third and a fourth body come bob up from Lake Mead, and I'm gonna go back. This was like I said, the first two came about like at the beginning of May, like within a few days of each other. Then in July, on July 25th, 2022, the National Park Service recovered human remains at the waterline of the swimming area at Swim Beach in Lake Mead. It was partially encased in mud. The gender and cause of death is still pending. The coroner's office is still trying to identify the man found in a rusted barrel on May 1st in the Hemingway Harbor area, and the second man whose bones were found on a sandbar near Calville Bay. The body in the barrel is considered a homicide by the local police department since the man was shot. On July 6th, the body of a 22-year-old woman was recovered after she disappeared while riding a personal watercraft. Her cause of death has yet to be determined. On July 28, 2022, the body of a kayaker was recovered after he was reported struggling to retrieve an inflatable kayak that had blown away the evening before. This was near Scuba Beach, and rangers had to suspend the search temporarily due to severe storms through the evening. The 31-year-old man was not wearing a life vest. Now, let's go on now to the last update, which is a fourth set of remains found in Lake Mead on August 6, 2022. The discovery was made at Swim Beach, and Nevada's Clark County coroner has yet to release any information as to the identity of how the person died. Pending the disclosure, Todd Collard, 67, says he believes the second set of remains found belonged to his father, Daniel, who drowned in Calville Bay in 1958 when he was 3 years old. His father's body was never recovered after he was thrown from a boat which flipped due to a wake. The boat the two men were riding in was found circling on its own about a mile from the drowning site. However, Daniel Collard, 22, was never found. The other man in the boat survived. The discovery made on May 7th, 2022 at Calville Bay of a partial denture appears to match Daniel Collard's teeth. Daniel Collard lost his front teeth in a car accident a year before his drowning and wore a partial denture. DNA samples were taken to confirm the identity of the remains. However, none have been taken from the members of the Collard family. The coroner said the person was aged between 23 to 38 years. Todd Collard noted on Find a Grave regarding a memorial on the site for his father Daniel, quote, his father was a mobster named Ruby Collard, although there is no suggestion that Daniel's death was a result of foul play. In 1954, newspapers listed Ruby Collard as one of the owners of the Showboat Casino and Hotel, which opened that year. He was also one of the principal owners of the Desert Inn, which was bought in 1967 by Howard Hughes. In 1965, Collard was convicted of extortion in federal courts. He died in 1967 from a heart attack while waiting in appeal to the Supreme Court for his conviction. So bottom line, Ruby Collard looks like he was mob tied. Okay. And his son, Daniel is the one that dies in that flipped over boat, which his body is not been well, maybe possibly what his son is saying, Todd is saying, is that he thinks that the second set might be his dad, and it's incredible to think that they never recovered his body. But let's see. I'm following this. This Lake Mead thing is fascinating. You know, God knows what else is in there. All right, off to our second story. This is out of Daily Mail. This is titled "The 3-Inch Shrunken Head That's Real: Centuries Old South American Santa Sansa Sitting in Canadian Museum is from a Human. Scans show." A South American shrunken head has been confirmed as real human remains and not a counterfeit. A new study reveals. This is great. Oh boy. New CT scans show the 3.3-inch shrunken head donated to a museum in Canada in the 1940s is genuine and was once the head of a Peruvian Indian woman. Researchers say hair shafts can be seen to pierce the upper layer of skin in precisely the same way as human hair follicles are embedded in the dermis. Shrunken heads, or sansas, are cultural artifacts that were produced by certain indigenous cultures of Ecuador and Peru until around the middle of the 20th century. It was believed that sansas contained the spirit and knowledge of the individual from whom they were produced, and so were thought to hold a supernatural power that could be conferred to the owner. However, some convincing counterfeit shrunken heads made from animal body parts or other alternatives often used in commercial reproductions make it hard to distinguish the real from the fake. Commercial sansas were often made from animal skins including pigs, monkeys, and sloths. Oh boy. Using clinical computed tomography (CT) and high-resolution micro CT scans, researchers were able to determine the sansas currently held in the collection at Kent Museum in Chatham, Ontario, is in fact real human remains. CT scans produce two-dimensional images of a slice of a body or body part, which are then collected and layered to construct three-dimensional images. This technique really redefines archaeology because traditionally archaeology can be aggressively destructive, said Lawrence September, Poeta at Western University. Digital archaeology, including computer tomography, provides a whole new dimension of validity and refreshes the field by making it far less invasive. Researchers don't know how old the Chatham Sansa is, although they say it likely dates back several centuries. Typically crafted by men in an elaborate multi-step process, sansas are made from the cranial skin of enemies slain in combat. The gruesome process involved making an incision at the back of the head, peeling the skin and hair off the skull and soaking them in hot water and hot sand. It's thought sansas were created as early as the 1500s to trap the soul inside the remains, as the eyes and mouths were sewn shut, the researcher says. By shrinking the head of a fallen enemy, the victor was believed to harness their spirit for servitude and prevent the soul from avenging the enemy's death. Sansas were used in ceremonial rituals in which the power of a given shrunken head could be transferred to a household. Following the ritual, the supernatural power was regarded to have left the shrunken head, at which point the sansas itself originally became nothing more than a keepsake. However, the influence of European and colonial visitors in the 19th century saw post-ceremony sansas acquire commercial value, with their owners willing to trade them away. Demands for the curious soon outstripped supply, resulting in a market of inauthentic sansas, some made from human remains, others from animal heads or synthetic materials, for export to European and North American purchasers. This particular sansa was donated to the museum in the 1940s by a local family after it was purchased on a tour of the Amazon basin. The original accession record lists the sansas as coming from Peruvian Indians in South America and nothing else, which is not unusual, but this was not enough to conclusively determine whether it was real or counterfeit. But the team knew they were looking at human remains when examining the eyes, ears, and hair using high-resolution micro CT scans. You can see the individual skin layers on the clinical CT scan, but on the micro CT scans you can actually see the individual follicles. And it becomes really clear what's going on, said Andrew Nelson, chair of Western's Department of Anthropology. The stitching that was used to close the incisions, as well as the eye and lips, can also only be critically examined using a micro CT scan. Although the team attained conclusive evidence that the Santas is human remains, they were unable to determine whether the purpose of the head shrinking was ceremonial or commercial. Further study of the materials used to seal the eyes and the lips could reveal more. If vine materials were used to seal the eyes and the lips, it would likely identify the Sansas as ceremonial. But if a more modern, cheaper thread was used, it is more indicative of a commercial interest when it was being made, said Poeta. The researchers won't know for certain the details and ultimate purpose of the shrunken head construction until more Sansas, those that are guaranteed as ceremonial and those expected as fakes, are examined. We always work respectfully and intentionally with the subjects of our research, and we look forward to working with our Ecuadorian colleagues, including the Shower and Achuar, to guide any future work, said Poeta. Okay, I'm thinking, well, if they uh, judge this thing to be hundreds of years old, it would seem to be that it's ceremonial, right? And it's a woman. And I guess where I'm going with that is, at their sighting where they would do this with enemies. You're thinking, well, maybe this is something that, enemy warrior men, but how did she end up being okay. All right. This is also out of Daily Mail. It's titled Slither Thames. Mudlark discovers an enormous snake skin on the shore of London's famous river that may have been left by a boa constrictor. And this is a first because I thought that climate there would be too cold, but here we go. An enormous snakeskin found on the shore of the River Thames may have been left by a 5-foot-long boa constrictor. The skin was found on Monday by Jason Sandy, a London-based mudlark, someone who scavenges in river mud for items of value. It is possible it was shed by an abandoned or escaped boa constrictor, a renowned species of non-venomous snake native to South America that is known for coiling around its prey and compressing it to death before swallowing it whole. Luckily, even human babies are too big for the snake to swallow, and as a result, fatal attacks on people are rare. They've contacted the RSPCA and Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine about a conclusive identity of the snake that left the skin. Wow. Let's see. Sandy posted several photos of his astonishing find to Instagram. Yikes, yesterday I spotted this large snake skin on the foreshore, he said. I couldn't believe my eyes. A very large snake shed its skin and it washed in with the tide. I felt like I was mudlarking along the Amazon River, not the Thames. I did look behind my back to make sure the snake wasn't lurking behind me. I hope the snake skin isn't evidence of more snakes living along the Thames. In response to a user comment, Sandy said that he left the skin where it was because it smelled really bad. He also told Mail Online that the skin was about 5 feet in length and was found on the north shore of the Thames near Hammersmith Bridge. That's weird. I mean, I found a lot of... Maybe it's because it was in the mud, but usually those things don't smell. Although native to South America, the heavy-bodied snake is frequently kept and bred in captivity and kept as pets in other parts of the world, including the UK. Exotic Pets UK describes the boa constrictor on its website. The species makes a great exotic pet, however, a large enclosure is required when adult. But it has also been found in wild on British soil. In 2020, a 5-foot-long boa constrictor was found near Barnes Bridge and Cheswick, not far from where Sandy was mudlarking on Monday. It was slithering in the undergrowth along the Thames before it was captured by the RSPCA. At the time, RSPCA Animal Collection Officer Jade Guthrie, who rescued the reptile from the riverside, said it was likely abandoned rather than being a stray reptile. Today, the charity confirmed that the 10-year-old called Ruby was happily reunited with her owner. She had been missing for 2 weeks and had escaped, likely due to becoming very active because of the hot weather. Okay. Wow. And this is, well, for those of you watching the video version of this, this is the picture of the 5-foot-long boa captured in August 2020. And it's funny because here in Florida, they just finished with what they are calling the python hunt. In other words, since it's become so invasive here in Florida, the governor went ahead, because remember here the climate is ideal for them, that they basically they put out a bounty, all right, and here's a short story on it. You can see this is not 5 foot over here in Florida. Sometimes here for those of you looking, python hunt in Florida Everglades starts offers up to $2,500 cash prize. More than 800 competitors signed up. I have to look. This one right here, the photo shows University of Florida researchers holding a 15-foot Burmese python captured in Everglades, and this is in 2009. All right. And yeah, this is because they grow very large very quickly. And the thing is that they have, I want to say, maybe with the exception of alligators, they really don't have any predators to keep their numbers uh, in line. So, yeah, over here in Florida, they get a little bit bigger, just a tad. Okay, then next story is out of Mysterious Universe. It's titled The Most Dangerous Creature in the World of the Paranormal. Avoid them. In the field of cryptozoology and in the world of the paranormal too, there are some creatures that are more dangerous than others. And with that in mind, today I'm going to share with you the things you really should avoid. We'll begin with the Nyalmo, a huge dangerous offshoot of the abominable snowman. Bernard Hevelmans, one of the most important figures within the field of cryptozoology, said that during the course of his research into the Yeti of the Himalayas, he had learned of no less than 3 distinct kinds of creature that roam the vast mountains. This opinion, said Hubelmans, was confirmed in 1957 by a Tibetan Lama called Punya Bhaira, high priest of the monastery at Bunath, who spent 4 months in the high mountains and brought back the surprising but valuable information that the Tibetan mountain people knew 3 kinds of snowmen. There was the Rimi, a man-beast of close to 3 meters in height that dwelled in the Barunkola Valley in eastern Nepal and which was specifically omnivorous. Then there was the Rakshi Bompu, a beast of roughly human proportions and which Hevelman said must be the Sherpa's reddish Yeti or Mite, which leaves the footprints 20 to 23 centimeters long, that has been found in many quantities. Finally, there was the imposing and terrifying Nyalmo. Hevelmans came straight to the point. The Nyalmo are real giants, between 4 and 5 meters high, with enormous conical heads. He continued, they wander in parties among the eternal snows above 4,000 meters. In such empty country, it is hardly surprising that they should be carnivorous and even man-eating. Now on to other dangerous beasts. The Wendigo is a very much misunderstood monster, one which is a staple part of the folklore and legend of the Native American tribe known as the Algonquin. The monster is typically described as a tall, crazed, and violent thing that roams the forests of the Pacific Northwest, the northernmost states of the U.S. and Canada. It is a large humanoid beast that dines on human flesh. There is, however, another aspect of the lore surrounding the Wendigo, namely that if a person eats human flesh, he or she can shapeshift into a Wendigo. Adding to the legend, the Wendigo has the ability to take control of our minds, always for terrible and horrific reasons. In that sense, as well as a shape-shifting angle, there is what we might term a mind-shifting process. 2. One of the most intriguing theories for what may have provoked the legends of the Wendigo is that they were based upon early centuries-old reports of Bigfoot encounters. Certainly, there are more than a few reports in which Bigfoot-type beasts have acted violently in the presence of people. There are even reports of people vanishing in the woods and forests of the United States amid theories that the Bigfoot, when food is scarce, will feed on just about anything, and that includes us. The Kushtaka, or the Kushtaka as it is known, is a monstrous, manipulative, and sometimes deadly creature that is a staple part of the folklore of 2 specific groups of Native Americans living predominantly in the state of Alaska, but also in other portions of the Pacific Northwest coast. Their names are the Shemian, and the Tingli. The former are known as a people of the tides, while the latter are referred to as being inside the Skeena River, on account of the fact that they once inhabited significant portions of the Skeena River, British Columbia. It is within the teachings of these 2 tribes of people that we learn of the hideous shape-shifting things that provoke mayhem, terror, and death throughout the region. Dennis Waller is one of the leading experts in the fields of the Kushtakas. He notes in his 2014 book, In Search of the Kushtaka, that the word Kushtaka equates to land otter man, which is highly appropriate, taking into consideration that this is precisely how the Kushtaka is described. It is important, however, to note that the creature is not literally half human and half otter. Rather, it can take on both forms. But things don't end there. The Kushtaka can also manifest in the shapes of giant wolves. and very often bipedal upright wolves, and also large hairy humanoids, not at all unlike Bigfoot. In the Bigfoot seeking community, Waller observes this is giving me rise to the thought provoking theory that the Kushtaka may well be an Alaskan Bigfoot, one which over time has been incorporated into native lore and legend. On the other hand, however, and as Waller also notes, for the Tishmian and the Tingli, the creatures are monsters with the power to morph. In that sense, the jury is very much out when it comes to their true identities. Keep away from these monsters. You may not survive a close encounter with them. Of all the many and varied shapeshifters that populate our world, there is no doubt that the most feared and dreaded of all are the jinn. They are extremely dangerous and manipulative entities that can take on various forms, and just as they see fit, it is ironic that the jinn in reality is such a feared and powerful creature. The irony stems from the fact that popular culture and the world of entertainment have collectively dumbed down the nature, power, and dark characters of the jinn. This is very much as a result of the production of the likes of the 1960s television show I Dream of Jeannie and the 1992 Disney movie Aladdin. There is, however, nothing amusing or lighthearted about the real jinn. They are the ultimate shape-shifting nightmares, and they will do all they can to get their claws into us, and particularly so if we are reckless enough to invite or invoke them. So why precisely are the jinn so tied to us, the human race? Rosemary Ellen Guiley offers the following, which is undeniably worrying. They can eat human food when they take human form, but our food does not sustain them. It gives them pleasure. They can absorb the essence of food and things like the molecules from tobacco smoke, which provides enjoyment. Their main source of nourishment is the absorption of energy from life forms. The best is the draining of a soul, but is difficult to do and is considered unlawful. It is, however, practiced by certain powerful renegade jinn. The vampiric absorption of the life force can be quite detrimental to people and cause health problems. There you have it. For the jinn, we are a source of food, but that is not all. The jinn clearly enjoy taunting and tormenting us too. Sometimes this can be a mild degree and even relatively innocuous in nature, with jinn moving items in the homes of their target and placing them in other rooms. This is an issue that mirrors the odd antics of so-called tricksters like elementals who enjoy manipulating us chiefly for their own warped amusement. More often than not, however, the jinn display highly dangerous activity that very often begins with disrupting electrical equipment. Everything from microwaves to refrigerators, computers to telephones and electric lights to ovens. Sometimes a jinn will perform a favor for its target, which is specifically where the concept of the genie and the three wishes derived its origins. But it is almost always a favor that backfires, leaving the person in a far worse state than before the jinn ever manifested. Far more disturbing, the jinn can cause a person to fall sick, and typically dangerously so, and even to die. Paranormal infection is very often the name of their grim game. Beware. Equally dangerous are what can accurately be termed supernatural seducers, dangerous entities that thrive on sexual energy, such as organ energy, as theorized and documented by William Reich. Also part of the equation, a highly charged sexual dream may be deliberately initiated by such things, which over the centuries have been referred to as incubus, succubus, Lilith, and the old hag. Also relevant to this angle is the reason why so many supernatural encounters occur at so-called lovers' lane locations. In these cases, voyeurism and sexual emotion lead to feeding. Poltergeists, violent entities that can cause chaos in the home and who delight in tormenting us as much as they are energized by us, are also part of the equation, as are thought forms and tulpas, creatures created within the human mind and the depth of our imaginations, but which can be externalized and given a strange form of life in the real world. Key to the survival of tulpas and thought forms is that we believe in them. The stronger our belief, the greater the ability of the tulpas to live. In other words, they feed on and coldly and carefully nurture our belief systems. Then there is the Slenderman, a sinister figure which started out as an internet experiment, but which has mutated drastically in the last few years, to the extent that numerous people report having seen the Slenderman in the real world. It's a perfect example of a modern-day tulpa, thought form running wild in our reality. Witnesses describe seeing the scrawny black-suited figure looming over their beds in the dead of night, extracting energy and dining in a fashion that would even have chilled the likes of H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe. The men in black fall into this category, too. Those who have had UFO encounters and who have been visited by the pale-faced ghouls known as MIB state that, while being threatened and intimidated by the men in black, they have felt cold, clammy, weak, and lightheaded. As many of the unfortunate witnesses have stated, it's as if the MIB are draining them in the same way that a flashlight drains a battery. And using the same analogy, when the light finally goes out, we do too. Let's now take a look at the angle of soul stealing in relation to the UFO phenomenon and the dwarfish grays. Here we see evidence that even if we, the public, aren't getting the full story, certain elements of the US government may know what's going down. Or probably more likely, they strongly suspect why we exist and what our fates could amount to. The reference in highly classified files to the human race as containers of souls are as ominous as they are chillingly thought-provoking. The possibility that when we die, our souls are somehow converted into the equivalent of a form of energy-based food is enough to give anyone nightmares. Huge, unending, hellish factories in which human souls are devoured. Good luck expecting the government to come clean on that one. Many UFO researchers are highly critical of government agencies for hiding the truth from the public and the media. I say try putting yourself in the position of those who are sitting on this terrible earth-shattering secret. One can hardly blame them for not wanting to release a story that would at the very least be paradigm-destroying on a worldwide scale. So the only thing they can do is to bury the entire issue as deeply as possible. There may well be a sense of what the people don't know won't hurt them, until the day arrives when it does hurt them, of course. As all of the above demonstrates, there are some absolutely dangerous creatures out there. Some are flesh and blood animals, and others are of supernatural and paranormal natures. Either way, it should be avoided. Some may want to eat you, others might want to drain you of your energy. In those cases, we're talking about parasitic creatures. But what it all comes down to is that every single one of those creatures should be carefully avoided. Trying to take them on in a face-to-face situation will not work. Not in the slightest. The grim fact is that they're far more powerful and dangerous than we could ever be. There you go. Okay. Next we are on to, this is out of the New Yorker, and it's titled Bringing Back the Woolly Mammoth. And let me tell you, I had previous weeks I had come across a few articles where they were basically, they've recovered so many of these mammoths up in Siberia. That they're basically intact. It's not fossil. They actually have recovered really intact, like skin and tissue and stuff. So it's not far-fetched at all. Okay, this 4th of July in Brattleboro, Vermont, marching bands and fire departments and Vietnam veterans and baton twirlers and a motorcycle convoy paraded down Main Street past Sam's Outdoor Outfitters and Mocha Joe's Coffee House and up the hill towards Brown and Roberts Ace Hardware and the Brooks Memorial Library. You had to arrive early to get a spot on the sidewalk. Kids handed out tiny paper American flags glued to wooden toothpicks. A naked man covered in red paint decided to walk silently in the middle of the street in the other direction. No one stopped him. Later he told the town paper that he had been protesting the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health Organization. Love the country, hate the court. Brattleborians seemed to agree. Hey, hey, ho, ho, the Supreme Court has got to go, marchers chanted. Two people carried a sheet lashed between three branches painted with lines from Marge Piercy. I am not your cornfield, not your uranium mine, not your cow for milking. Also in the parade, an 8-foot-tall woolly mammoth on wheels made out of plywood, chicken wire, PVC pipes, burlap, coconut husks, white birch barks, nails, box springs, buttons, rusty iron tools, and deer bones. For tusks that had coiled metal tubing, and for a trunk, a chimney liner. It's a climate prophet. Kevin O'Keefe, who built it, said, O'Keefe is a circus artist and a writer. From a gray plastic bucket, he hands out prophecies to parade goers. One read, humankind, animal kind, and earth are all one, all belong to the same home, true, but one of us is a homewrecker. Since 1970, wildlife populations have fallen by 2/3, according to the World Wildlife Fund. The World Animal Foundation has predicted that a third to a half of all non-human animal species will have become extinct by 2050. A study published this month in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, citing the latest projections from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and evidence of the accelerating mass extinction of non-human species, reports that previous mass extinction events occurred due to threshold effects in the carbon cycle that we could cross this century. What does the woolly mammoth have to do with all of this? If Save the Whales was the motto of the environmental movement in the 1970s, Bring Back the Woolly Mammoth is something of a slogan for the 2020s. Woolly mammoths, which are as big as the African elephant but closer genetically to the Asian elephant, lived across Asia, Europe, and North America until about 10,000 years ago, although in some places they survived until about 4,000 years ago. They are the first species whose extinction humans came to understand and could prove. The reason was harder to know. Humans were first believed to have played a role by hunting them, but climate change more likely caused the decline by ending the last ice age. The mammoths left behind bones and giant tusks, which Western naturalists began collecting in the 17th century before the discovery of dinosaurs. The mammoth, often confused at the time with the American mastodon, was the dinosaur of the early American Republic, as the historian Paul Simonon wrote in American Monster, evidence of antiquity of greatness and apocalyptically of possible doom. 2 centuries before Charles Darwin's boarded the Beagle, analysis of mammoth remains proved that Earth is much older than the account given in Genesis, and that contrary to Christian doctrine of divine design, not every species that God created lasts forever. The unearthing of the mammoth proved the existence of a time before time. Its disappearance was taken as a warning of the possibility of an end of time, a way to imagine for the first time the extinction of humankind. Woolly mammoths keep being unearthed. In June in the Yukon, in the territory of the First Nation people, the Trondek a gold miner hacking into the permafrost, came across a baby mammoth about a month old, exquisitely preserved, her legs tucked under as if she'd just fallen asleep. Trondek elders decided to name her Noon Choga, big baby animal. She's beautiful and one of the most incredibly mummified ice age animals ever discovered. Grant Sazula, the Yukon's government paleontologist, said, "She has a trunk, she has a tail, she has the tiny little ears. She died alone, very likely having wandered off and got stuck in the mud." Creating a baby woolly mammoth today is the objective of Colossal, a bioscience and genetic engineering company founded last year by the Harvard geneticist George Church and the serial entrepreneur Ben Lamb, who had earlier launched the similarly named AI firm Hypergiant. Extinction is a colossal problem facing the world, the startup's websites announced, and Colossal is the company that is going to solve it. The plan is to reconstruct the DNA of the woolly mammoth using CRISPR to combine it with the DNA of an endangered Asian elephant, make an embryo, implant it in an Asian elephant, or perhaps into a not yet invented artificial womb, and begin to de-extinct the species. Resurrected mammoths would populate the permafrost and avert its melting by turning wet tundra into dry grassland, which better sequester carbon and reflects sunlight, keeping the permafrost cooler and thereby save the planet. After Colossal had raised its first $15 million from venture capitalists, among them the Winklevoss brothers, Lamb, who is the CEO, said that the company expects to have its first calves as soon as 2025. Last month, Colossal announced that together with the Vertebrates Genomes Project, it had completed the reconstruction of the DNA of the Asian elephant. Aside from the countless ethical problems, technological hurdles, and scientific improbabilities of this venture, it makes almost no sense as climate change mitigation. It's too little too late, and that's not even considering the plight of the motherless baby mammoths alone and wandering helplessly. By the end of the 19th century, the dinosaur had dethroned the woolly mammoth as an American emblem and became the favorite megafauna of Gilded Age oligarchs. Robber barons loved the idea of a giant reptilian carnivores. In 1906, J.P. Morgan financed the installation of a T-Rex in the American Museum of Natural History. Colossal is funded in part by musky, tusky tech billionaires keen to future-proof the world. They're hoping to build animals out of Bitcoin and code. Meanwhile, back in Brattleboro, a homespun and better-loved hope for humanity, made out of chicken wire and birch bark and burlap rolls, along with through pine dark woods. You know what? I agree. You know what? The climate cycles, animals cycles, fauna cycles, everything cycles. even before modern humans. All they have to do is say, look, deserts, what's desert now was once underwater, or marshlands, vice versa. You know, now they're, deserts, or the other way around. That's why, we have parts that were once underwater where they find fossils of fish or sea creatures. In other words, everything cycles around: the weather, the topography, and animals. And I don't know, if it went extinct, it went extinct. You know, going back to Jurassic Park, where once I got over the excitement, you know, of them bringing back these dinosaurs, these three scientists realized this is a big mistake. You know, in other words, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think I don't this thing about that, something with the tundras. It's like, no, no. You know what? It wouldn't be the first time that, despite the best intentions supposedly given for doing stuff that we shouldn't be doing, turns out to be the wrong thing. Wrong thing. Nope. They're extinct. Leave them extinct. Collect their bones, put them up, study them, talk about them, and that's it. This is the next story is out of the Black Vault, and it's titled "The Guy Hotel Memo and the Crash Flying Saucers of New Mexico, March 22nd of 1950." Okay, the following memorandum was first released by the FBI in the 1970s, but did not gain notoriety until much later. It was written by a special agent of the FBI by the name of Guy Hotel. I hope I'm pronouncing this Hotel or Hottel, who addressed the memo to the director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover. Within, Hottel described the information from an Air Force investigator in which 3 flying saucers had been recovered in New Mexico. In addition, each saucer was occupied by 3 bodies of human shape, but only 3 feet tall, dressed in a metallic cloth. According to the informant, the saucers were found in New Mexico due to the fact that the government had a very high-powered radar set up in the area. The FBI never followed up, according to them, and in their own words, they called the memorandum a mystery. In August of 2022, the Black Vault finally received the full Hotel memo without redactions. FOIA case, and they cite the FOIA case, was filed on August 2nd of 2022, and although the FBI denied my request for expedited processing, the release of the record came within a week. On August 8th, 2022, the Hotel memo was released in full. Although the standard boilerplate language in the FOIA letter states that the information was pre-processed, there is no indication online or in published articles the complete memorandum was ever published unredacted. They said the newly released version can be seen here. And basically what it's, when you go by this is a memorandum that this guy who, Guy Hotel, he sent it to the director of the FBI, dated March 22nd, 1950. Okay, and it's typewritten, but it's got some handwriting on it in cursive, and it says "flying discs" or "flying saucer." I guess he's trying to make up. And it reads: the following information was furnished to SAR H. Kurtzman by Carl House, Special Investigator, Sex Squad, Metropolitan Police Department. An investigator for the Air Force has stated that 3 so-called flying saucers had been recovered in New Mexico. They were described as being circular in shape with raised centers, approximately 50 feet in diameter. Each one was occupied by 3 bodies of human shape, but only 3 feet tall, dressed in metallic cloth of a very fine texture. Each body was bandaged in a manner similar to the blackout suits used by speed flyers and test pilots. According to Mr. Howe's informant, the saucers were found in New Mexico due to the fact that the government has a very high-powered radar set up in that area, and it is believed the radar interferes with the controlling mechanisms of the saucers. No further evaluation was attempted by S.A. Kurtzman, I take it to be Special Agent Kurtzman, concerning the above. Okay, which leads you to believe what? Okay. This reveals that Robert H. Kurtzman, FBI Special Agent in Washington, D.C., received the information from another law enforcement agency, surprisingly not Silas Newton or a Silas Newton type informant with unverifiable information. The information came from the Metropolitan Police Department, presumably Washington, D.C., and Sex Squad Special Investigator Carl Howe. Where the Metropolitan Police Department received the information remains a mystery, however, as it could be Silas Newton, or again a Silas Newton type person expressing a hoax story. It was an interesting find to see another law enforcement agency informed the FBI, not some unreliable source. Now the question is, at what level did the Metropolitan Police Department investigate the claims in order for them to feel the need to waste the FBI's time with it? Although still a mystery, at least now we have the full document with the names attached. Okay, and then additional information. The following is published by the FBI in March of 2013 to explain the memorandum. Although they give some additional facts, they call it a mystery with no viable explanation. It's the most popular file in the FBI vault or high-tech electronic reading room housing various bureau records released under the Freedom of Information Act. Over the past 2 years, this file has been viewed nearly 1,000,000 times, yet it is only a single page, relaying an unconfirmed report that the FBI never even followed up on it. The file in question is a memo dated March 22nd, 1950, 63 years ago last week. It was authored by Guy Hotel, then head of our field office in Washington, D.C. Like all memos to FBI headquarters at that time, it was addressed to Director J. Edgar Hoover and recorded in and indexed in FBI records. The subject of the memo was anything but ordinary. It related a story told to one of our agents by a third party who said an Air Force investigator had reported that 3 flying saucers were recovered in New Mexico. The memo provided the following detail. Quote, the saucers are described as being circular in shape with raised centers approximately 50 feet in diameter. Each one was occupied by the 3 bodies of human shape but only 3 feet tall, dressed in metallic cloth of a very fine texture. Each body was bandaged in a manner similar to the blackout suits used by speed flyers and test pilots. After relaying an informant's claim that the saucers had been found because the government's high-powered radar in the area had interfered with the controlling mechanisms of the saucers, the memo ends simply by saying that no further evaluation was attempted concerning the matter by the FBI agent. That might have been the end of this particular story, just another informational dead end in the FBI files, but when we launched the Black Vault in April of 2011, some media outlets noticed the Hottel memo and erroneously reported that the FBI had posted proof of a UFO crash at Roswell, New Mexico, and the recovery of wreckage and alien corpses. The resulting stories went viral and traffic to the new vault soared. So, what's the real story? A few facts to keep in mind. First, the Hottel memo isn't new. It was first publicly released in the late 1970s and had been posted on the FBI website for several years prior to the launch of the Black Vault. Second, the Hottel memo is dated nearly 3 years after the infamous events in Roswell in July of 1947. There is no reason to believe the two are connected. The FBI file in Roswell, another popular page, is posted elsewhere. Third, as noted in an earlier story, the FBI has only occasionally been involved in investigating reports of UFOs and extraterrestrials. For a few years after the Roswell incident, Director Hoover did order his agents at the request of the Air Force to verify any UFO sightings. That practice ended in July 1950, 4 months after the Hottel memo, suggesting that our Washington field office didn't think enough of that flying saucer story to look into it. Finally, the Hottel memo does not prove the existence of UFOs. It is simply a second or third-hand claim that we never investigated. Some people believe the memo repeats a hoax that was circulating at that time, but the Bureau's files have no information to verify the theory. Sorry, no smoking gun on UFOs. The mystery remains. FBI Biography of Guy Hotel. Guy, or Guy, Hottel was born around 1902. He was a graduate of George Washington University in Washington, D.C., where he was a star football player. He was later inducted into the university's Athletic Hall of Fame. He entered the FBI as a special agent in 1934. In December of 1936, he was named acting head of the FBI's Washington field office. He was appointed special agent in charge the following May and served until March 1941. Hottel was reappointed special agent in charge in February of 1943 and served until 1951, when he took a position in the Identification Division. He retired in 1955. Hottel was married 3 times and had 2 sons. Following the FBI career, Hottel served as executive secretary of the Horsemen's Benevolent Association. He died in June of 1990. And I guess, no, you can't Can't question him now, obviously, and makes you wonder, did anybody ever speak to him after that? Well, that would have been an interesting interview. Hey, about that memo that you wrote back in 1950? All right. This next story is out of ITV. It's titled Traumatized Teesside Family Claims Paranormal Activity Forced Them to Flee Home. A petrified family on Teesside claimed they had to flee their home in the middle of the night following a series of paranormal activity. Lauren Roth began renting a house in Trimden Avenue, Acklam, last November, but soon noticed abnormal things happening. This included Miss Roth getting bruises out of nowhere, lights turning on and off, and her son screaming in the middle of the night. The aesthetics practitioner and her husband Stephen, along with their two children Arabella and Caleb, lasted 7 months before being driven out. In the final weekend of June 2022, the family hit breaking point when 6-year-old Caleb started screaming in the middle of the night. The 30-year-old said she believes in spiritual things, so when weird stuff began happening a month into their tenancy, she soon thought things were not right. She said, "It got to the point where my son was talking to somebody. They used to sleep all night with no problems at all. My son would wake up and he'd stand at the top of the stairs staring." Miss Roth also alleges her son told her there was someone in my bedroom, and 4-year-old Arabella claimed she saw a cat and woke up with scratch marks. She added things were getting moved around the house and thrown down the stairs. We'd seen something during the night. Miss Roth also said there was one occasion when she felt like she had been choked. According to Miss Roth, the rented house is around 60 years old, and at the end of June, a spate of incidents were the final straw. The family was relaxing in the garden when around 8 p.m. Miss Roth put Caleb to bed, where he was said to be screaming, "Get off me and leave me alone." The Middleborough mother told her brother, who was visiting at the time, that her son had had a nightmare to prevent scaring him. She said, "As soon as I said that, the bathroom lights just turned off. That night at 2 a.m. we left home and went to my mam's in a taxi. To save returning to the house, the family bought a caravan and lived on their neighbor's drive before finding a new home." Miss Ross said the whole saga was traumatizing and has left her calling in Northeast paranormal investigations to try and work out what's going on. It is claimed that lights turned off again, and when paranormal investigators said, "If you want us to go and leave this property, now turn the light on," they did. Miss Roth also said the medium told her to recite the Lord's Prayer and burn sage. Since the family has moved home, Miss Roth alleges that all abnormal activity has stopped, including Caleb's sleepwalking. She said, "I believe in it to a point. You see it in movies, but you don't think it's going to happen to you. We've literally had to get up and move. We had no other choice. My son is still wary, but he daren't still go upstairs because he thinks that something is still there." It'll be interesting to find out what was 60 years old. What's the history of the house? Even though sometimes that can bleed over from other properties. And then the last story, this is also out of ITV. I couldn't resist it just with the title alone, which was more reports of vampires in Yorkshire than in Transylvania. A new study shows that there are more reports of paranormal activity in Yorkshire than anywhere else in the UK. The findings were compiled by paranormal investigator Reverend Lionel Fanthorpe, who says he has uncovered 11,000 reports of unexplained phenomena in Britain since 1914. There's only been a handful of reports of any kind of paranormal activity in Transylvania over the same time period. 615 paranormal activity cases have been reported in Yorkshire over the last 100 years. In the whole of Britain, 11,204 reports were filed, 206 of them referring to vampire encounters. The study was commissioned to mark the start of a new vampire TV series called The Strain. Oh, that's incredible. It looks at 50 years of paranormal investigative records. Two of the vampires looked at in the investigations are the Berwick vampire. This is one of the earliest accounts of a British vampire. The locals apparently eventually found his resting place and set his corpse alight. And the Alnwick vampire. Alnwick was apparently previously known as home to a terrifying vampire. The vampire was reported to have had a hunchback, and in the Middle Ages he would stalk the grounds of the castle. It's been said that locals attacked him with pitchforks and torches, reducing him to ash. When we looked at the map, there were a great many sightings in Yorkshire, more than the rest of the country. Just as human beings have different hearing abilities, some hear higher sounds than others, and some sounds are inaudible to some people. Just like some can see in clearer detail than others, some can see colors while others are colorblind. We have variations in hearing and also perhaps seeing, so maybe areas where paranormal sightings are reported, people there can perceive what other people can't. So in Yorkshire, for example, there's a higher proportion of people with psychic perception. And of course, this dates back to 2014. I just had to look at it because of course, the Strain, which by the way was a great series. It was really good. It really used that vampire thing and it took it in a whole new direction. But I had never heard of that. That Yorkshire and UK was giving Transylvania a run for their money. So anyway, guys, I hope you like this bit of weird news, and I will be back soon with you guys. Let's see what comes about. I'm telling you, every day something weird happens. It's guaranteed. Till then.